Hi guys, and welcome back to this new video. This time we will see how to write real code in Flutter, where you have to put your code, and how you can write the structure of your code, the difference between stateless and StatefulWidget, and what are widgets in general. For those who haven't seen the previous part where I talk about some command lines about Flutter and how you can create a new project and the project structure when you create a new project, how you work with the pubspec.yaml, you can find this video into my playlist, or I will link it up. The thing that you have to understand when writing code, when you are writing applications in Flutter, is that you are using the Dart programming language. And this programming language can be used for doing other things, for example, for writing backend applications or other stuff. So this programming language, it is not tied to Flutter. Flutter is a group of tools that you use to build your application for mobile or web or even desktop. And you have to write Dart in a way so that the Flutter framework understands it. So you have a structure, a way of writing code that is tied with the Flutter, So when you are writing code in Flutter, you have to understand that there are some rules that are absolutely essential that you follow, and there are other ones that are only guidelines. For example, when you write in Flutter, you have to understand that all your packages you have to put them in the app part, and then you have your code. And one of that rules is, for example, when you import packages or import your files, you may maybe it's better to, as a guideline, is better to leave a space when you want to import your files. For example, import myfile.dart. So you have a clean way to understand that here you have packages and here you have your files. And this is a guideline, for example, that you can find into the documentation about Flutter, or maybe you can find it into the Dart documentation. So when you're writing Flutter, as I said, you have to put all your imports upward, and one of the main files that you have to import is the material package, or if you want to use iOS, is the Cupertino, or you can obviously import them both. So the material package is a package that is essential because it contains all the material design, or all the design of the Android application. So for example, how the button is styled, how the icons are styled, etc., and follow all the guidelines of Android applications. Instead, the Cupertino package contains all the things but for iOS. And in our example, in our project, we will use only the material package, but they are really similar, so they are not so complex to understand, and they contain pretty the same things, so you will not find too much difficulty if you want to continue with Cupertino. So here you put all your imports, your packages, and as I've shown the last time, when you have these packages available from here, for example, obviously these are packages that are tied with Flutter, but if you want to import your packages from pub.dev, so for example, you can find a package, for example, I don't know, provider, And if you go here in the tab of installing, you will find your package here. As you can see, for example, here it says that you have to add it under dependencies, and you will find all the instruction about how it works, how you can install it, etc. So for example, if we copy this here and we go under dependencies, tap enter, we put it like here. If I save, it will add our package, as you can see right here. But if it doesn't, you can use your terminal and you can type Flutter pubspec.yaml and it will download your package. Now, if you go here and you do import package provider, as you can see here, we have our file. And obviously, if you want more instruction about how it works, you have to see here, for example, how to import it, which file you have to import, etc., etc. An example how the package works, you have to follow these guidelines. So, as I have said, let's delete this, and from here to let's close. So you will have to put all your packages right here, and maybe if you want some dev packages, you will have here. So so here you will have all your imports, and then you will have some, as I said before, you have some rules that are absolutely essential. For example, here you have a main and a runApp. That this function and this function here are absolutely essential. Is important for Flutter to understand, to know where he has to start his application. And for example, this file here is important. So these are strictly rules, and you have, for example, the main that says to the Flutter project where he has to start. For example, in this case, we will start here, and it will call runApp, that it takes the widget that it will get, and we will see it in a moment, and it will print it into the screen, stretching it so that it will fill the entire screen. So now let's start by creating one widget. So we can have two types of widget, the stateless and stateful widget. These concepts are super important. So one of the main things that you have to understand about Flutter is the difference between stateful and stateless widget. So what I want to achieve in this tutorial is that I want to make it the most simple way possible. So I will not use complex terms or terms that you can find into the documentation or other YouTuber know about them. So if you want a more specific term or more specific explanation, you'll find a lot in other YouTubers' channels. So that said, stateless widget is a widget that it doesn't change. So it's a widget that remains still and doesn't change. Instead, the stateful widget is a widget that changes, and we will see that in a moment. So the stateful widget is a widget that can change the structure, etc., etc. Now let's see an example. So if you're using VS Studio Code, you can use some snippets that will help you to write faster code. So you don't have to worry to write all the boilerplate. For example, if you type Stateless, as you can see here, you have we have pre-generated a stateless widget code, and it will put the pointer in a point where you can insert your name, for example, my app, and then we can call this widget here. Now, if we save and run the application, it should work. So as you can see now, it has started our application without errors, and it is working. It gives us a black screen because we have to do some things before it prints out something, and that is the stateless widget. So as you can see here, you have this name, the name of the class, that extends a stateless widget. It works in that way. So you have to extend or a stateless widget or a stateful widget. And this is the name of your class, and this is a widget, even if you see class, but this is seen as a widget. So, and how it works is that you have to override the build method, and when the stateless widget gets called, it will return, as you can see here, this is the type of the thing that will return. It will call this build method, and it will return a widget with a context that give you some useful information about the context of that widget, and we will see that later, so not now. And after it gets executed, it will return the things that we'll find inside here, the widget that we'll find inside here. The same thing applies for the stateful widget, so it is not so different. So the same things apply for the stateful widget. It will get called, you have a build method, and then it returns something. But we will see it in detail after a few seconds. So the screen is black because Flutter needs to know how you want to render your information, how you want to render them, in which way. And as I said before, we use the material package because we want that Flutter understands that we want to print an Android style. So let's do that thing. And to do this, we call a widget that is called MaterialApp. So when you call this widget, you have to pass to it some properties. For example, since this app looks for some routes are a way so it can understand where he has to start. And usually you have to define a home route. You can define or a home, or you can give it a group of routes, and but you have to say to it where he has to start from which route should start the application. So now let's define the home route, and inside the home route we will pass a scaffold. So the scaffold contains all the basic visual structure of Flutter, and for example, we have the body, and here we can pass to it a widget. For example, let's suppose that we want to show some text. Now let's save. And as you can see here in the app left, we have test written. So maybe you can't see it so well, but you have a test written here. And so that's it. It prints the basic design that is that follows the basic design of the Android style. And for example, you have an app bar that you will usually see in Android application. And if you want to understand the property, what type, if you have Visual Studio Code, you can hover over it and you will see that it wants an app bar. So as you can see, now it prints test. Maybe here I will write something like our app, so it will not get mistaken. So this is the app bar, and this is you can see this style a lot in Android applications because, as I said, this material package follows the Android design. If you do the same thing for the Cupertino package, you will see the style of iOS. So right now, as you have seen till now, those are all widgets. So the widget, you can see a widget as a block of code that it can be used inside or with other blocks with our widget. So widgets work in that way, in this way in Flutter. So you use one or more widget as blocks. You put them together. You use one inside another, so you can achieve your goal. And every widget do a specific goal. For example, this widget here prints the text. As you can see, it takes this argument and it can take other arguments. This widget, for example, it prints the app bar. Or for example, now let's see another widget. Here you have another way to simplify things in Visual Studio Code. If you highlight this text and press here, and you do with wrap with, you have wrap with widget or wrap with sender. You will use wrap with widget if you want to add a generic widget, and it will wrap it with widget, or container, padding, etc., etc. In our case, we would use wrap with sender, so it will censor it. And here we will put a comma and Ctrl-Shift-E, so it will get formatted. I have put a comma here, so it will format it in this way. So for example, if I put another comma after the parentheses here and here, and I press Ctrl-Shift-I, it will format it like this way. If I leave the comma and I format it, it will put it in this way. Okay, and as I have said, when you use this thing here, it will center it. So now we have used another widget, the center widget, that, as I said, every widget does a specific goal. For example, this one centers his child, centers the thing that has inside it, and in our case it centers our test here. So as you can see here, it centers this test here. So now we can see a stateful widget, and if you have Visual Studio Code, you can transform the stateless widget by highlighting it, pressing here, and convert to stateful widget. So right now I will show you an example, and I will explain it to you. So now I have transformed a stateless widget into a stateful widget, and when you do operation like this, you have to restart your application, and you can't use the hot reload feature. And after doing so, I have added an example that I will explain in a second. So as I said before, the stateful widget is a widget that changes, is something that have a state that changes. So let's see in this example. So when you have a stateful widget, you will have this part here that it will create a new state every time that you will call, for example, a special function, for example, the setState. And in our case, we don't have to worry about this part, but our main concern is the state. This part here is what we have to look for. So here you have, as before, a build method. Always it returns a widget, and here, as before, I return a material application with a scaffold and some text. But this time I use a variable to render my text, and then I use a button to do some action. So let's begin from here. So here I have defined a new variable called number, and I have initialized it at 0. This indicates the type that is this variable is of type integer, and it starts from 0. So when you do this thing here, you are indicating that this variable here is a private variable, so you will not use it outside of this widget. In this case, is true, since we use it only inside this body here, so it is private. So, but you can call it like this. Is not a problem, but it is suggested that you indicate that is a private variable. Obviously, it is more suggested when you have a big project with a lot of variables, so you know what you are looking for. And remember that when you call functions and variables, to give it a clear and understandable name, so you know what you are looking for. So, and here I have created a new function, void, because it doesn't return anything. So when you use void, that means that it will not return anything. In this case, we are not returning anything. And this function is called increment number, and it will increment this number here, as the name suggests. And here, what I do a really cool thing. I call this special function. This special function called setState is can be used only on a stateful widget. So this is one of the differences between a stateful and stateless widget. So you have this function here that contains that you can pass to it a callback. A callback is a function that gets called later when needed. So when the widget will update the state, it will call this function here with the content that we will say to it that it has to call. I hope that it is understandable. So when it needed, it will call this function here, and it will update this number here. So number plus plus means basically number plus 1. So it will add 1. It's the same thing of doing so if you do like this or type plus plus, it's the same thing. It's only a shortcut. Okay, so here this is the same example that you will get when you type Flutter create and your application. Here you have the same material application, the scaffold as before, and in the body I have the center as before and the text. And here, instead of typing test like before in the stateless widget, I have typed number, that it is our variable, and I have converted to string. Why? Because this is an integer, and typing to string in that way, and typing to string in that way, it will convert it into string, since this widget, the text widget, wants a string as a parameter and doesn't want an integer. If I delete this, you will see that we have an error. The argument type int can be assigned to the parameter type string. It needs a string. And since we have a number and since we want to increment it, so it will, if we will create a string number, we can't increment it. So we need a number so we can increment it. Then here I have added floating action button. It is this floating button. So the name suggests it, and which takes a child with this icon here, and another parameter called onPressed, where you can pass to it a callback as before, and so when get called, it will when you press it, it will call this function. So I have did like this. I have called it like this without using the parentheses, because in that way we gave the responsibility to this parameter. As I said, is a callback. So when this parameter, when we press the button, it will call this function here. and if we type the parentheses, it will call it before, and it will print the things that we have inside. So it is not what we are looking for. But here we can even give it an anonymous function. Just like this, it will do the same exact thing, but it is better to split things into functions, so it will be more understandable and more clean. So if you see right here, right now, it's cleaner than before. So seeing increment number, you understand that you are passing this function here, and it is cleaner, and you have even less code. So what happens when I press the button? As you can see, it increments the number. So how that is possible? This is possible because thanks to the StatefulWidget, we can do the same thing with the Stateless widget. So when we press the button, this function gets executed, and it executes this special function called setState, and it calls this function here that will increment our state. But when you are writing, when you are working with stateful widgets, you must understand one thing, that the only thing that get rebuilt, it is only this part here. So as I said before, it will build this part here, and it will return this thing. So every time that you will call setState, it will call the thing and return a new state of this stuff here. So this is the reason why every time you will see number to string. But it is better to not pass to it all that stuff here. I have did it now, so I will not add a lot of things, so maybe it will be harder for you to understand how it works. So, but it is better to put only the things that you want to change, and we will see that the next time, or maybe other times, I don't know. And you have, it's better to put, for example, here to return only, to create another widget, and return only the text that changes, for example. Is an example. And yeah, that's it. So every time only this part get called and get rebuilt, every time that this setState get called, and here it will print this a new number. So this is the same reason why here you have an incremented number, and you don't have every time 0 or 1, because if it was calling the entire class, here every time it has to start from 0 and print a new number. So this is the same reason why it knows where the number is left off. So if I have now 6 and press the button, it prints 7, because it knows that since it calls only this part here and not the entire application, and not the entire state, it knows that this number here, now it is at number 7, and since you call only this part here, it will call this setState here from the increment number, and it will update only this part here. And then there is another special function that you have to know, and there are many other inside the StatefulWidget, but this one I think that we can finish with this one. And this function is called initState, and it gets called only one time, but when the StatefulWidget gets rendered. So when the stateful get rendered into the screen, it will call this function here, but it will not get it will not get executed every time that you call, for example, setState. It will not get executed, but only the first time when it gets rendered. So let's restart our application. As you can see now, if we not restart our application, it will not call it and it will not print hello. So as you can see now, it has printed hello, but if we press the button, so here it gets incremented, and but it not prints hello more and more times. The only part that that calls every time, that, as I said before, that we call this increment number is the build. With setState, it calls the build. So this is the same reason why it doesn't print this thing here. And let's see with a print here. So now if we press here, as you can see, it gets called every time. So that's it for this time. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this type of video, let me know in the comment section. Let me know in the next videos what things I can explain. And if it is useful, please remember to subscribe and like this video. And if you are interested in other things about Flutter, you can find it into our channel. Thank you so much.